Good morning. This is Brian Underhill, founder and CEO of CoachSource. Welcome to our webinar today. We'd love for you to get acquainted with the chat panel down below as everyone is entering into the room as we speak here. If you'd use the chat panel, just tell us who you are and where you are so we can greet you and say hello. We probably can't greet everyone, so go ahead and type into the chat panel who you are, where you are. We have Sharon from San Diego. Beautiful San Diego. Ed from Tennessee. Oh, now they're coming in fast. Sydney. Oh, wow. Can't even read them this fast. Laura from Seattle. Tenny from Los Angeles area. Marge, Chicago. Jonathan, New York City. Maya from Kuwait. Jesus from Miami. Chuck. Hi, Chuck. How are you? From Chicago. Pam, Minneapolis. There are a lot of names coming in. We have Rafael from Poland. Kathy from Nairobi, Alex from Bangalore. We have an amazing wide spread of the world here. There's Amy from Sacramento, Jane from Raleigh, North Carolina, Martin from Dubai, Linda in Tucson. We have people all over the world. Lori right here in the Bay Area where I am. A lot of familiar names too. So great to see everybody. Welcome, welcome. Julie from Cambridge. In the UK. Josette from Chicago. Well, thank you so much for joining us for our webinar today. And why don't we start that first slide there, Jeff? There we go. Okay, it's on my other screen. So I'm going to introduce Jeff in just a moment. But first, we can tell you just a little bit about CoachSource on the next page. Just for, in case, most of you probably know who we are, but in case people don't.
It's just this page. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so for those who don't, CoachSource is one of the largest executive coaching providers in the world. And we're headquartered in Silicon Valley, as you can probably tell from my background. We're actually an all virtual company. We have been since we started, so we're a little used to sheltering in place like this, I suppose. We have about 1,100 coaches in over 60 countries or so, all independent practitioners who run their own businesses. And we oversee coaching assignments from at corporations and nonprofits and so forth of various sizes, from maybe one assignment per year up to hundreds of assignments per year. With us today is our Vice President of the Global Coach Community, which is Jeff Nally. So let me tell you a little bit about Jeff. So Jeff was an internal executive coach at Humana, which is a Fortune 100 company. And he was there for 9 years before he left to start his own coaching firm. And that's actually when I met Jeff. He was our client when he was inside in Humana. That's right. And so he is a specialist in neuroscience. He had his training with the Neuro Leadership Group and has a certificate from them. So that's obviously going to be part of what he covers with us today, which is always fascinating. He has recently been promoted. So when Jeff left Humana, I then said, oh, we got to figure out a way to get him to work with us somehow, some way. And so we quickly got to work on that, and he became a coach with us. And then he's had various roles here at CoachSource, and has always been an absolute pleasure to work with. But the new news, for those of you who are coaches in our network, you may have seen the announcement that he was recently taken on a new position with us, as you can see, as the VP of the Global Coach Community. So he oversees all aspects of our coaching pool, from who comes into the pool, how we build community among the pool, growing and developing the pool, and what best practices for coaching for coaches and so forth. So he's got a big role here. Jeff is also a professional speaker. He's a member of the National Speakers Association. So we're glad to have someone professionally who knows what they're doing as a speaker to guide us today. That's why we thought he would enjoy doing this with us. He's also PCC with the ICF and co-author of 2 books, Rethinking Human Resources and Humans at Work. And we're getting a lot of congratulations, Jeff notes in the chat panel from folks here. So,
thanks, everybody.
Yeah, so Jeff, thank you for doing this for us today, and welcome.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Brian. Hello, everybody. It's great to be with you, and those of you who are live, and also those of you who may be watching a recording at a later date. So it's great to be a coach in the CoachSource community, and it's also a thrill to step up and be connected to the entire global coach community. And welcome to our webinar today on finding your way without losing your mind, how to lead teams through change and uncertainty. So today's conversation is going to be around how we lead ourselves as leaders of whatever we lead, whether it's your own business or your own direct report team inside another organization, or how you lead and influence others when we're in the realm of uncertainty. So I'm going to share the overview of what we're going to discuss today so you'll know what to expect. We're going to talk just a moment about the neuroscience of losing your mind and what happens in your brain when that occurs. We'll talk about what it means to dampen emotions versus control emotions for ourselves and for the people that we work with. And then we're going to move through leader as observer and how during moments of uncertainty and crisis, your observations as a leader are so much more powerful and important than your name as leader in the org box on the org chart. Then we're going to share the brain-based approaches to communicating with certainty and clarity and how we can make sure our messages land in the listener's brain and make it easy for their brains to really understand what we're saying, especially when the pressure is on. And then finally, we're going to talk about creating a competitive advantage during a crisis. Seems a little unusual during times of extreme stress and pressure to do something to create an advantage for your team or your organization, or maybe your entire profession, but now is the time to do it. A few times throughout today's webinar, if you're live, I'm going to ask you to go into the chat. I'm going to ask a question, and I'll ask you to type in your responses, what comes to mind, what your experience is, because we want to have your voice, and not just my voice, in today's webinar. Well, it is the end of April 2020, and if you didn't think you knew what change, uncertainty, challenge were, now we know. Between things that are COVID-19 related, that are about health and safety and security, all the way to the other end of the spectrum where we have the economy and physical examples of what people and organizations can do and can't do right now. Everything, it seems, in our physical and non-physical world is turned upside down. So I feel like a lot of speakers and other professionals, probably like yourself, who have led through change or taught about how to lead through change or facilitated teams in your organizations to go through change. And it's almost like nothing really prepared us for this. And that's true. But even in these times of extreme change and challenge, there are things we can learn, do, and be differently that we can use after the COVID-19 crisis subsides and things move forward from there. Because there are always small challenges, big emotional upsets, or crises that come into our lives and our organizations every day. And today we're going to talk about how to do this in what seems to be like regular non-crisis times, and it's just a moment in your day, to times like this when everything we do is in the midst of a context of a crisis. All right. There's plenty of examples of what this looks like. Right now, I have experience coaching some executives in the senior healthcare space. And the pressure and crisis they're under is, how do I keep my employees safe? And how do I keep all the patients and the residents in our community safe? They are under extreme pressure. And the crisis that they're experiencing seems to come from all different directions. If you're a coach, or a trainer or facilitator, or you own your own business, you're realizing what a shift that you're having right now in which products and clients are able to continue, even though they can't meet in person with you, or they can't do some of the events or meet in the context the same way you did before. In other cases, some of your business may have just totally gone away. It doesn't exist anymore until the current crisis is over. So regardless of who you are or where what your role is for yourself, for your own organization, for a team you lead or a group of people you influence, I'd like you to think about this question and then move over to the chat space and type in your answer. What is the one thing that is happening right now in this crisis that triggers your stress, that really puts you under pressure, that causes you to lose sleep? What's the one thing right now that's triggering you and your stress and is affecting who you are and how you lead or be in your current role?
Here comes some
Brian, what do
answers,
you think?
Jeff. Yes, misinformation, business revenue uncertainty, cash flow anxiety,
Mm,
financial insecurity, safety for clients, losing clients,
yeah.
uncertainty, job search, client cancellations, being present for my clients when I have just lost my mother, financial
Mhm,
restraint, making sure everyone is okay, what
mhm,
uncertainty about what the new norm will look like,
mm.
cancellations of clients, health of family, being present for clients remotely, fear of loss, just fear,
Fear. Mhm.
um, not losing sleep but can't swim in the sea or walk on the beach, constant bombardment of increasing risks and restrictions, fear of what I cannot see. So many answers here. This is
Great.
incredible. Yeah.
Thank you all for those answers and for putting them in
Lethargy.
there. Yeah.
Lethargy. I have that problem.
Yeah. Sometimes we're just worn out by the crisis or the stress or the uncertainty, right? It is emotionally, physically, biologically draining on us as humans. So let's talk about what is happening in your brain when you are under pressure and you are stressed and you're experiencing all the things you just put into the chat. So I know if you're not a neuroscience nerd like I am, this is the moment where you're like, oh, I see a picture of a brain. I'm going to check out. Please don't check out. I have two promises for you. One is there'll be no probes or electrodes in your brain as part of this program. And Zoom helps make that happen. But I want you to know, even in my live audiences, when we talk about the brain, no probes and no electrodes. Two, just want to to have your attention go to just three parts of the brain, three simple functions. So as we talk about how to lead through change, you'll know how that reflects, how that happens, how that really occurs in your own brain. So first, in the middle of the brain there, down toward the center, is the amygdala. Of course, this is the emotional center of our brain. Everything we experience comes through emotions, and this is the part of the brain that fires off and lets us know just exactly what you put in the chat. Fear, fear, fear. Threat, threat, threat. Danger, danger, danger. That's the part of the brain that sends the emotional signals and the emotional um, headlines all across your brain and all across your body. And then the rest of our brain responds accordingly. So it's the center where our brain actually, center of our brain where emotions are actually occurring. The kind of the back part of your brain, we'll just call in general your long-term memory. That's everything you do that's on autopilot, like how to get dressed in the morning and how to drive a car and what the directions were to your grocery store. You don't have to actually think about those things. You created mental neural maps. They're stored, and you draw on that experience when you need to. You pull that information forward to help you get through the day, but it's really kind of in the background on autopilot. It's not something you have to think about. The prefrontal cortex, this spot, which is very small and it's right behind your forehead, that's the part of the brain where we focus our attention. We take in information. We listen or observe two or three things and kind of play with them and tease them out and toss them around and make a decision. We might have an insight, a new idea, a next step that pops into this part of the brain as a result of our focus there. And then we quickly want to put that back in our long-term memory so that we don't have to think about it again and we can move on to the next thing that's uncertain or complicated. All right, so how does that help? When we lead in times of uncertainty and crisis and stress, our amygdala fires off. Our amygdala starts to send out negative, defensive, threatening, inhibiting emotions across the rest of our brain. And it turns out when that happens, It shuts off the prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain where you're literally paying attention to the right information, where you can make an observation, make a clear decision, or decide how to move forward. Many of you have heard of the amygdala hijack, when the amygdala and your emotions overwhelm you so much that you don't even think straight. And if you're like me, and you've either raised or been in a household with a teenager, this happens a lot. Your amygdala fires off, and you do irrational, unparent-like things about which you hope you could have made different choices. It's because your prefrontal cortex is shut down when your amygdala is fired up. So what we really want to do is to find a way to dampen that amygdala and get your emotions into a neutral to slightly positive state, to kind of turn off the automatic pilot in the back of your brain, and to let your prefrontal cortex open or actually take in the right information so you can have an insight or aha moment. Which brings me to my next question that I'd like you to answer in the chat. Whether you're working from home or you're actually going back to an office in a workplace, we are bombarded by little stressors every day and big stressors every day. Sometimes an amygdala hijack can be as minor, if you will, as seeing the email pop up from someone that you know you have a conflict with, and you can't believe you have to have this conversation again. Other times, it's a big amygdala hijack, like our health, our safety, or a COVID-19 issue causes a crisis for ourselves or our loved ones. And those are typically not the times we have our best ideas. So here's my question for you to type into the chat. Where or when do you have your best aha insight moments? Where do you have moments of clarity where you get a decision to something you've been thinking about, but you didn't expect the decision to pop in your head? Or you have a new idea or a way forward that you weren't even thinking about the problem, and then suddenly this pops in your head. So Brian, tell me what we see in the
Yeah.
chat.
Where do you have your greatest aha moments? I was jokingly saying, I don't know if we want to hear that, Jeff, but we're definitely getting some showers, walking, running, walking in nature, exercise. Someone says in Zoom meetings like this, museum, gallery, early morning walk, talking to friends in the morning, meditation. I've seen that a few times. Pre-COVID, in the pool or a cup of coffee when everyone is asleep. Walking dogs, under pressure. Weird, but true.
Yep, that
when
can happen.
Relaxing. It can happen anytime so long as I'm not distracted. I know for me, it's when I'm trying to go to sleep, which then keeps me up half the night. That's where I get my best ideas. When relaxed, maybe that's why that's happening to me. There are a couple more relaxing. Meditation. Yeah.
So great. So thanks for that. And that's true. You know, it's so odd because not very many people posted when I'm in my chair at my computer working on something, or when I'm at the office in a staff meeting, right? So what happens here is that our brain has those insights when our emotions are neutral to slightly positive. And that doesn't happen a lot when we're bombarded with things that we're supposed to pay other attention to, or we're under pressure, or we're just distracted by other things that are really getting in our way. So yes, all the things you mentioned, going for a walk, taking a shower, all those things put our brain in that space of having that reflection or insight. Now what's difficult, and I will share this with you because I'm a former HR professional, it's not okay to move your meetings to the shower just because that's where everybody's going to have a good idea. This is not according to company policy, and I'm not endorsing that at all. But there are ways that you can dampen your emotions and put your brain and the brains of other people that you lead with in that state so you can have those insights and aha moments and next steps and clarity and focus while you're working, while you're in the Zoom call, while you're focused on things that are work related. So I'm going to show you very quickly 5 ways to do that for yourself and your team and those around you. So when our son was in kindergarten, I watched the kindergarten teacher, as I sat in class one day, try to settle down 2 kids up front who were disruptive and who were not paying attention. And she looked at them and said, okay, use your words. Tell me how you feel. And I thought, well, that sounds kind of weird and fluffy and woo-woo. Well, what she was doing was what we now know in neuroscience is a way to dampen your emotions, and that is to name the emotion that you're feeling and experiencing. What's interesting here is functional MRI studies show that when you accurately, specifically just name the emotion you're feeling, it doesn't spiral you out of control or magnify that emotion. It actually dampens your amygdala. We have a braking system, just like tapping the brakes on your car, to dampen our emotions. And the first way to do that is to name the emotion. Now, I've put a little screenshot here of a few names of emotions. Unfortunately, most of us aren't trained in how to name emotions. If I asked you to list all the emotions you could think of in the next 2 minutes, you would probably run out with a pretty short list of maybe 15, maybe 20. We tend to think in terms of emotions as polarizing, like opposites, like I'm happy or I'm sad. But there's this whole range of emotions in between. And what we know about how to calm and dampen our brains and those around us is to be able to name the emotion that we're feeling specifically. Am I perplexed or am I confused? Am I fearful or am I angry? And just by naming it specifically, then you alter and tap the brakes on that amygdala hijack, which causes your prefrontal cortex to open up, if you will, in functional MRI studies to light up so that you can have those ideas and insights. So next time you're feeling stressed under pressure, name your emotion to tame your emotion and name the emotion you're experiencing. So a lot of the stress and a lot of the changes that come our way are not things that we can control and not things that we like and not things that we can change ourselves. So for example, I'd like you to take a look at the monitor, the screen now, and I want to put in front of you a painting. And I just want you to look at it and just think about what you see here. It's not a Rorschach test. There's nothing manipulative here. I just want you to observe this painting. And now I'm going to put a frame around it. And with this frame, think about what are you seeing in that painting now that stands out? Maybe the formality or the architecture of the frame causes you to see something you didn't see before. Here's another frame. Now, when this blue frame is around, maybe you see something a little differently. Maybe the oranges pop out, or maybe the blues kind of blend in with the frame that's blue. And here's one more frame. Now that it's a black square frame, wonder what you're seeing now and what you're experiencing. So the second way to dampen your emotions is to reframe, literally put different frames, different orientations around things you can't change or things you don't like or things that are stressing you. And in neuroscience, we do that not by putting physical frames around our stressor, although you can try that. We do that by asking reflective questions. And the most powerful reframing question, the frame to put around the thing that is stressing you is, what can I learn from this? When we jump into learning mode, our brain, get this, emotions drop to neutral to slightly positive. Our prefrontal cortex is open. We're not focused on what we think we know or what we've already hardwired in our head, and we can try to see something different. Other questions that help you put a new frame around something you can't change to dampen it are, what do I see here that's important to me that could be useful right now? What am I experiencing that's helpful, even though we're in the midst of a crisis? What about this situation might help me achieve what's important to me? Kind of the what's in it for me perspective. What helps me achieve something that I need to look forward to, or I didn't think was possible now? Or what is it about this situation or this crisis that helps the team in some way that I'm not looking at? Reframing is another way for you as a leader to help you and your team dampen emotions. Some time ago, I led a group of 80 executives at a company that was being acquired, and I led them through group coaching over a series of 4 months. They were a really good company. They had really good operations. They had lots of retail outlets. They were in connection with their customers directly. There was nobody between them, and they had been acquired by a very large corporation. And one of the things that we focused on in group coaching was they decided that in order to be a good and valuable and surviving member of the organization that they're being acquired by, and to manage through the transition, they were going to have to reprioritize what they focus on and what their work is. So reprioritizing is another way to actually dampen emotions and get your prefrontal cortex to open. Instead of focusing on efficiencies and their retail outlets, the things that they were trying to continue to do really well, this group of 80 leaders through group coaching focused on a new priority, and that was, how do we connect and integrate with the company that's acquired us? We're still going to be operating as a standalone. They've never done this type of work before. Our connection to them and the way we integrate with this larger corporation is what our new priority should be. So we dampen emotions, especially around things that are stressful, by asking, what priority is this for me? When is this a priority? Now, 2 weeks, a year from now? What kind of priority might this be? Is this a health and safety priority or a process and efficiency priority? For whom is this a priority? Is it me, my manager, my team, our suppliers, our customers, the community at large that we serve, the not-for-profits we're connected to, the legacy we have from the previous leadership? For whom is this a priority? And when you're asking these questions of yourself and your team, your emotions start to dampen and your prefrontal cortex opens and you're able to have new ideas and insights to keep you moving forward, even though it's a very stressful time. The COVID-19 epidemic seems to be very unique to us right now. And for many people who have never experienced something like this, it probably is. But you know, it's not the first pandemic that has come around the globe. And if you look at history, there have been comparisons and contrasts to things like the Spanish flu pandemic, the HIV/AIDS crisis, other strains of flus that have gone around the globe. There are lots of comparisons and contrasts that help us think through what we might be able to do now. I have a lot of friends and colleagues, and I do a lot of speaking at HR conferences and inside corporations to HR teams. And I can tell you right now, the HR profession and the people profession is the one experiencing and administering furloughs, layoffs, how to hire new employees to do things they didn't think they were going to have to do 8 weeks ago, how to shut down plants and facilities and keep a culture alive that doesn't exist in the same physical space it did 8 weeks ago. So when we experience a stressor, another way to dampen our emotion is to normalize it. Now, I don't mean normalize it in the sense that we want to trivialize what's happening or think that this is the normal that's going to be around forever. No, the question to ask yourself and the team as you lead them through crisis and our emotions are out of whack is to ask, what's not unique about this situation? Who has experienced a similar situation or crisis before? Where can I go to get guidance because they may have seen some of this before? Which organizations might be going through similar changes that I'm going through? How do I connect to those or learn from what they're doing? Who can help support me because this may not be as unique as I think it is? And the most important one for ourselves to really find your way without losing your mind is to ask, is feeling this way normal or expected given the current crisis? And to acknowledge that for yourself as a person, as a leader, and to forgive yourself and to pat yourself on the back just for moving through this particular crisis. That dampens the fear, threat, negative amygdala response and opens our prefrontal cortex so we can have a new idea. When I led HR for a large manufacturing company, we had a very tumultuous couple of years. We had acquired 7 other competitors and moved them all into one company. We had never done an employee engagement survey, and while the culture seemed to be good at certain manufacturing plants and corporate offices, it wasn't good everywhere. But we decided it was important to do an employee engagement survey to find out, what do things look like from the employee's perspective? So we did. This is back in the day when engagement surveys came in a big paper envelope through the US mail. So when it did, I convened all of 13 of my HR managers from across the company. We sat down at a big table, I unsealed the envelope, and we passed around the results to look at what the engagement survey had to say. What was interesting was we had a terrible 2 years with health insurance, and people having troubles with the health plan, and our out-of-pocket emergency room payments like more than doubled. And so we just knew this was going to be bad news for the benefits program. But what we learned from that engagement survey by looking at the data was employees really valued and treasured our health plan. It was so much better than what they experienced or saw outside of our company. And what they really, really wanted was more and better communication around that health plan. So what we did was we actually looked at ourselves as HR or the company through a different lens. Another way to dampen your emotions or lead in a crisis is to pick up the lenses and perspectives of other people, other constituents, and reposition your view. Consider other perspectives. What does this look like from the employee's point of view? What does it look like from my suppliers or customers' point of view? What does the community see if I look at this situation we are experiencing in this organization and I look at it from the outside in? What do I see? And what does the team see? When we start to jump in those other perspectives and we see things through different lenses, then it dampens our emotions, gives us a chance to think differently and decide what to do next. At the manufacturing company where we opened those employee engagement surveys, what the first thing we decided to do was communicate more, better, open, honest, authentic information about the health plan, even though nothing about it was going to be able to change for another 14 months. Looking through crises through other people's lenses, other constituents and stakeholder lenses, give you insight and ideas about how to move forward, even though it seems like a crisis. So Brian, I'd like to just pause for a moment here and see if you can check either the chat section or the Q&A function to see if we have any questions from folks who are watching the webinar so far.
We definitely do. Karen Gallant is saying, is naming the, so this is back just a bit, but is naming the emotion a way of using curiosity?
You've looked ahead at my slides, haven't you? It does. It means we're curious about our own thinking. We're curious about our own emotion. And that's why, and you've probably experienced this too, when you hear people talk about how they feel if they use generalized emotions, they keep going on, and they keep experiencing an emotion. But the moment that they say the specific name and an exact word about exactly how they feel, you can kind of see them take a breath and relax and then speak almost in a different way. Yes, we need to be curious about what emotion am I experiencing right now, and take just a few seconds to think about the exact name and label and then say it out loud so that our brain can dampen the amygdala.
Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't introduce people to the Q&A. Of course, you can use the chat if you'd like, because I'm watching that. There is also a Q&A panel on your interface here that you can use, and I'll keep an eye on that. But we did get another question from Patrick Riley. How do you determine which tool might work best when?
It's a great question, Patrick. How are you? Good to see you. So the good news is all 5 of these do the same thing to your brain. So it doesn't matter which one you use or how many, and there's not one that's better than another. Lots of people tend to gravitate toward the reframe, to ask themselves, what is it I can learn here? And you've probably seen stories in social media, especially around the COVID-19 crisis, or maybe on mainstream news media where they're putting good news stories. And what you hear a lot is, even though things are tough, what I've learned is, or what I've learned about myself is. This notion of learning does spark curiosity, and it does seem to be the one that is the easiest to gravitate to. In coaching, executives who tend not to want to think about their own thinking or talk about emotions, they're able to latch onto that reframing concept really well. So my suggestion to people who want to practice this is practice all 5. The next time you're stressed, pick one and start with it, and then do the same thing with the others. And after about 3 or 4 minutes, one, see how you feel and name that emotion, and then think about what's coming to my mind now that didn't come to me before I kind of stopped to dampen my emotions. Thanks, Patrick.
Mm-hmm. Another one from Orly, do we create some distance from the emotions when we name them? In other words, observing versus being attached to it.
Yeah. So Orly, thanks for the question. Yes, we do kind of put ourselves, our reflective self, in the third person. Our brain is still processing the emotion, but we've put the brakes on it escalating so that we can take a different perspective, make a different choice, do something different, consider another plan of action. So yes, that's exactly what we're doing. We're distancing ourselves, and some professionals call it psychological distancing because the emotion's still there, but you're distancing yourself from the core of it to do something like these 5 steps to come at it from a different direction. Let's take one more and then we'll move
One
on.
more. Sure. Olwen in the UK has a great one. She's talking about, couldn't you heighten anxiety in people when you ask them to name emotions? Because maybe they're feeling anxious, they sit there and then they're naming anxiety emotions repeatedly. Now, Jonathan Sibley is then responding to it by saying, name it to tame it.
Yeah,
What do you
exactly.
think?
Olin, thanks for the question. Good to see you. And Jonathan, thanks for paying attention to the slides. So it turns out, yes, especially like if you're helping your team or you're coaching someone and you're like, so tell me the emotion you feel about that. If they start to tell a long story, they're drumming up the emotions. What we want to do is to give them a little instruction. I'd like you to think for just a minute. Pick one word that succinctly, specifically, accurately describes how you're feeling right now. And then when they name the emotion, that's what tames it. The telling a story about it and letting them talk about the symptoms and kind of swirl around the indirect impact stirs up the emotion. It doesn't dampen anything. It's the naming it and then stopping that makes a difference. Thanks, Olin. Thanks, Jonathan. All right, let's move on. You're welcome to put more questions in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll see if we'll get to some more as we move through the rest of the webinar. All right, so let's move on to how to lead in a time of crisis. When you're leading under what we used to call normal times, sometimes that was like leading from the front of the room, you're ahead of your team, you're out there in front. In times of crisis or uncertainty or when there are challenges, that is not always the place you need to be as a leader. You need to be able to see and experience things from the ranks, from the team's perspective, from a stakeholder who's around that you maybe not have seen things from their point of view. When I led a team, I was getting ready to onboard. We had hired a new person on the team. It had been a long time since we'd hired anyone from outside the organization onto this team. And so I was going through all the checklist of things I need to do to get ready for this person to start their first week at the organization. And I knew all the things I was supposed to do. I thought, yeah, I've got this. I've done this for years. We've done this for other employees. No big deal. And then I thought, this is the first time we've hired somebody from the outside in a long time. What will her first week look like, feel like? What will she be experiencing? And if I put myself in her shoes, how will her week go? And what I realized was her first 2 days will not even be with our team. She's going to be in a corporate onboarding event. She's going to our corporate headquarters and she's never been here before. The event she's going to, while there be some security and people to point her in the right direction, she has no idea where she's supposed to be except the street address. So one of the things I did from just putting myself in her point of view was I met her at the front door outside at the moment she was supposed to arrive. I walked her through security. I took her to where she was supposed to be. I introduced her to the trainer and the onboarding team, even some strangers at her table. And then I went back to my office and the team for the rest of the morning, we mapped out the rest of her week and thought, what do we need to be as a team and who do I need to be as a leader if I'm observing things from her point of view? So in times of crisis or uncertainty, lead with curiosity, not with what you think you already know, and be an observer. We want to be observant like we're sitting back in the back of the room, watching ourselves leading and seeing, is this what the rest of the team needs? Is this what the organization needs right now? We want to kind of be in the crowd and put ourselves experiencing what they're experiencing, even if it's just for a moment, and say to ourselves, how would I rethink this now that I'm not just the traditional leader on the org chart standing in front of the room or standing at the front of the Zoom call? So some things to move with and be be careful of here is to be observant and be curious. So thank you for reading ahead, if you will, and bringing the notion and the question about curiosity. As leaders, we might think we're empathetic or we're experienced or we know what things are going to be like, but not if we're curious. We run on assumptions and we do things kind of automatically on the checklist or the way we've done them before based on that map we have in the back of our brain. Be observant and stay curious. Also, make sure we're asking, what does the team right now need? Especially like, what do they need to be safe? What does the team need right now to be healthy? What do they need to be certain or clear? One firm that I work with is a digital firm, and they thought they were going to be able to kind of work in their offices a little past kind of the rollout of the shelter in place orders, and it turns out they weren't. And so they stopped everything and took one whole day and got everybody home and safe, all their digital equipment where they needed to be, all the systems they needed to operate remotely, and they shut down the rest of the business for 24 solid hours. So they observed, what does the team need right now? Not what does the customer need, because the safety of the team was more important, because they couldn't service customers the next day if people weren't safe. And then finally, what's the one thing that the team needs to move forward? Right now, be safe, be certain is one thing, but all of us want momentum. Our brains crave, what's the next step? What should I be doing? And people on our teams crave that as well. So find out and think about what's the one thing the team needs to move forward. And that, as a leader, that's your job right now, is to help them move forward. When we're in a crisis or we're stuck, the lack of momentum, apathy, not knowing what to do or not being aware of what the next step is paralyzing. So be curious and lead as if you're an observer. All right, now I know a lot of you probably like TED Talks like I do, so I've been thinking about lately, what is it about TED Talks that we love so much, but even if we love the topic, we wouldn't really enjoy a 2-hour lecture on that topic like we enjoy a TED Talk? What is it they're doing when they communicate in a TED Talk that makes it so gravitating and holds our attention? Well, it turns out in TED Talks, they're doing a lot of brain-based ways that leaders need to communicate clearly and to communicate with certainty. I mean, I know lots of professional speakers who have had a TEDx talk, and if you know what they've been through, they go through sometimes up to 6 months of training with TED Talk people, even professional, high-paid speakers, so that in an 18-minute window, every single word, every single pause, every step on the stage, every image on the slide conveys the emotion, the intention, the message in such a way that it lands in the listener and observer's brain so they get it. That's why we feel so smart after 18 minutes of a TED Talk. So I'm not suggesting that as a leader that you should go out and do a TED Talk, but here's what's happening and what needs to happen in our brains as leaders to communicate so that our message lands in the brain of the recipient. So first of all, we need to make sure that we are creating an intention for every communication, right? Here's why I'm communicating this. Here's the meaning that I want to get across. And even here's the emotion. I was talking with a CEO the other day, and he was actually going to make a presentation, one that he's made a lot of times before, but the audience was a community-wide group who knew a lot about the topic and who had just received a lot of data and was kind of up to speed on the stats. And what he shared with me was, as his coach, was, I don't want to just go up there and give them a lot of data. They've already got it. I'm really stressed out and nervous about presenting to this group. What do I do? So I asked, what's the message and the intention, and how do you want them to feel at the end of your talk? And you could kind of see his amygdala dampen. His prefrontal cortex started to do some work, and he went, I want them to understand why education is so important for kids and the workforce and give them examples. And that was it. Then he had his presentation. So we have to do the same thing as leaders. What's the intention and meaning of an emotion we want to have, and make sure that we use that to craft whatever message we're sending. We communicate a lot by email, and we communicate even more by chat and text and email now that we're in the COVID crisis and most people are working from home or someplace else. Put the bottom line message at the top of whatever you're sending. Don't give the whole description. We want we want to answer all their questions and put the answer at the very top. We want to turn questions they're going to ask into the solution and put that at the top if we know it. We want to make sure we're putting the best idea and the key message at the top, and then say there's more detail and context or history below if you want to see it. But don't give them the full 4-paragraph story and then at the bottom hide the request. By tomorrow afternoon, please go into our shared Google document and upload all your information and data so we can blank, right? Put what you need on top and be clear. And another brain-based tool is short and brief is nice and sweet. As leaders, as experts, as people who know what we do for a living really well, we tend to want to talk a lot, right? So what lands in the listener's brain and the team's brain is what is short and sweet. And here's a challenge. Can you take your message and put it into 7 words or less that convey the emotion and content and action you want them to take? And start there. Another great way to do it is to use analogies or metaphors or song lyrics or movie things or movie themes or popular culture references that everybody on the team would understand. So for example, for those of you who go to the movies and may have done so in the 90s or the 2000s, if I tell you, yes, I know that we're up for a lot of challenges in the near future. And then I say, it might be a lot like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. That may not spark a lot of positive emotions, but I didn't have to spend an hour laying out all the fears and concerns. I can let you know, ooh, there's going to be several scenes. There's going to be lots of adventures. We're going to triumph. And some of it may be entertaining and some of it may be scary, but your brain captures that really quickly. So if you can't do a TED Talk, capture the essence, 7 words or less. Use a metaphor, an analogy, or something that the team might know as a reference, and that will land in their brain. And then you can tell them the history or the detail or how to move forward. When I worked at another manufacturing company, our largest customer had decided that they were not going to have us make, and they were not going to sell that product anymore. It was about 80% of our revenue for the entire corporation, and it was a big hit. The president sat down and talked with me and the rest of the senior leadership team, and we tried to figure out, so what are we going to communicate? Because this is really bad news. What he communicated that day was, I don't have all the answers, but here's what I know. We will have orders for the next 12 months. 18 months from now, there will be no more orders. We have to service this client the best we can and help them through their transition, not just focus on what our loss is going to be. We have 12 months to figure out how can this product or what we do really well in this product make a difference for somebody else. And maybe there's another buyer out there for us. I have no idea what this means for how many plants we're going to have or how many employees will increase or decrease. That's all I know right now. It's not about having all the answers as a leader. You're going to be bombarded with questions from yourself, from the context, from the organization, from people. The important thing is to communicate what you know and what you don't know, to be honest, to be sincere, and be authentic. And what happens in the listener's brain when you do that is, at least I know what they know. I don't really have a lot of motivation to go off and create a story that doesn't exist. And I've got a feeling that when they do know something, they're going to come back and tell us what they know. We're not going to be left hanging for the next 18 months. Communicate what you know and what you don't know. Both of those dampen the amygdala and the fear emotions in people's brains on our team and gives people hope and an opportunity to take their prefrontal cortex and do something different, like go back and keep making that product for the next 12 months, even though it may not be there 18 months from now. And bring the team together. Now, you've probably been a part of a lot of different Zoom meetings, calls. We're on one now that's a webinar focus. But if you're a leader and you have a team or you're part of a team, you need to bring the team together more frequently. We don't want people to feel like they're literally on an island and remote and out there and not able to connect. But be specific, be intentional about what each of the meetings will be. Bring the team together for staff meetings. A staff meeting is, here's the work we're working on, decisions are probably going to get made, here's the agenda, and we're going to have these meetings more frequently because it keeps our work moving forward. That's very different from how you bring the team together for like a town hall, where it's all the employees or the entire team or everybody in a particular business unit. Your intention needs to be different. What can I share that's going to be useful to everyone? What do I know? And what do I know? What do I not know? Now that I have everyone together, what's the best use of our time? And you can also use these, as you've probably seen from other places, to bring the team together socially. And that's important too. While it's still a Zoom call or a video conference or an audio conference call, bringing the team together is really, really important for a Friday afternoon social hour, a get together with no agenda. We're just going to check in and talk with each other and find out how each other's doing. We miss our social time, even if it's virtual, because we know we can't leave or we're not going to be back in the office the same way we were anytime soon. And getting together socially makes a difference. As a leader, bring the team together, but be intentional and be specific about each of the ways that you do that. A large metals company that I used to work for in lead HR was a really fascinating experience. The product we made was a commodity. The profit margin was 1 to 2 cents per pound of the metal that we sold. So we were always at the risk of like going out of business or having really terrible cash flow. It was a very, very tricky business to be in. And so were all of our competitors. I mean, we were all kind of in the same situation because we were a commodity. But even though it was difficult times and our margins were really tight and the pressure was really on, the leaders got together and we looked at what's one thing that differentiates us from our competitors and how can we stand out? And what we landed on was, because it's such a complex process to make this commodity metal product, how we collaborate and communicate as different complex teams to make this happen can make a big difference. So we took the time of crisis to actually do week-long, in-person, off-site training for teams on how to collaborate differently, communicate better, run through simulations. I mean, it seems kind of weird now, and you can't do it in a COVID crisis, but in a financial crisis and in a competitor crisis, we took this time away to do like business strategy, which is not something that you typically would have done. It made a big difference. What happened is that we got a chance to improve our processes, improve our efficiencies, and get our commodity product to customers faster than anybody else. And we got a chance to kind of rise above the crisis, even though our competitors were selling basically the same thing, and it made a difference. We're not going to be going back to, and I appreciate the comment that someone put in, what's going to be our new normal. I don't think there's a new normal. There's a new next, and we may not be sure what that is. We may not even know what that looks like, but we're not going to be going back to the way things always were, and they're not going to be always the same. Even our transition to whatever's next is going to be staged and calculated and careful and intentional. So one of the things that we need to do is to think about, maybe this is the time for you and your team to have your virtual offsite, to rethink how you move forward, to rethink who your customers are and what your new next is going to look like. Maybe it's time to coach, train, develop leaders for the new next that's going to happen in July and August, or to start now to prepare them for what the new next is by the time you get to the fall or the winter. We can't be paralyzed as leaders, and we can't think about or assume that things will go back to normal the way they were before. So I'd like you to go to the chat, and I want you to think about this question and drop in your answer. This may take a few seconds because your brain's going to have to think about this one. If you were to gather your team or your organization right now for a virtual strategy retreat, what's one thing that you see as your new next as you emerge from this current crisis? You're going to bring your team together for a virtual strategy retreat right now in the midst of the crisis. What do you see as one thing that's part of your new next?
All right, let's have if folks use the chat panel to answer that question. I like new next more than new normal, I must say. I'm getting tired of new normal. is a term. Clients more open to digital solutions.
Mm.
To clarify the current reality, more virtual work. Think totally openly.
Mm.
How to find positive changes to work-life balance, simplicity, healthy culture to organizations. Ongoing safety.
Mm.
Greener.
Ah,
Dealing with people's concerns over flying. Making room for people's humanity, not just their work personas. Keeping the good we've discovered during this crisis, and there definitely is lots of that for sure.
right, right.
Hybrid solutions, merging smartly old and new ways. Not only clients to be more open for digital, but also my team and myself.
Mm. Yeah.
Relook at our product and service strategy.
Great. Those are really useful.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So thank you for offering those, and I'm glad there are so many. I was sometimes we're so kind of stymied by the current situation that we can't think about the new next, and so I was totally prepared for no one to have any responses. But your brain did exactly what we hope it does when we think about the future. When we think about the future and we start to craft our new next, our emotions drop to neutral, to slightly positive. Your prefrontal cortex opened. You were able to have an insight, an idea, or the one thing that might be part of the new next. And that's something you can do right now and continue to do with yourself and your team, the people you coach, the people you lead, the peers around you, and the organization that you serve, is to think about what does the new next look like and how can we take the moment in the midst of this crisis to think about that. Well, now you have some new ways to not lose your mind, to find your way, and to help you and your teams move through uncertainty, challenge, crisis, and especially when things are not clear. Dampen your emotions and use those 5 simple ways to help people get out of the amygdala disruption or hijack and move forward. Lead as an observer, not just a traditional, typical leader. Be curious. Communicate with certainty and clarity. Tell them what you know and what you don't know. You don't have to know all the answers, but tell them what you know. And then create a competitive advantage. What's the thing that's going to help me and my team as we move out of the new next? Good news is that it's not rocket science. This is just simple brain science. And as leaders and people who help leaders and help our organizations, you can use these tools and these ways to move forward. Brian, do you have some things to share with us as we move forward to the close of our webinar?
Definitely. Yes, we have 2 announcements to share with you. 2, maybe 3, actually. We have another webinar coming, so in a moment I'll tell you that. But before I do, those of you who are familiar with us know that every few years we conduct a massive research study in the field of executive coaching, which was actually in the original book, Executive Coaching for Results and Follow-Up Studies. We're doing a trends survey on the field of coaching. And on the slide here, you can see a very long link for how you can participate.
Which we will email to them.
Yeah, a simpler way to participate is coachsource.com/research, and we can even send it to folks. So for the next about 4 weeks or so, we'll be collecting data on what are the latest trends in the coaching field. We're looking for as many coaches, both internal and external, as well as coaching program managers to complete these surveys. So please send it far and wide to everyone you'd like. And of course, you'll have a copy of the results when we're done. And I'm sure we'll do webinars as well. CoachSource will be launching this week, Leading Through Crisis, a coaching program designed to help leaders lead through crisis, but it's specifically done in a very short, intensive 6-week, maybe 8-week design. And also done at a more reasonable, much more reasonable price point so that a leader can get started immediately. And the coaches we'll be using are ones specialized for helping leaders lead through crisis. These coaches have either led personally through some pretty crazy situations and or may have coached leaders who've been through some very traumatic situations. We'll be sharing more about this with everyone up ahead. But we're really excited about the new program that we think is going to be very helpful to leaders. And then finally, our next webinar in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, I will actually talk more specifically about coaching in crisis. So how can you use coaching in crisis situations? How do you know which leaders could benefit from the coaching, from such coaching? What could coaching in crisis look like? I intend to have a few panelists with me who are coaches who've been through this before, who can give us some insights for what it was like when they were leading in crisis themselves or they were coaching a crisis situation. You can see that for May 27th. We'll send out an announcement. I'm told that Jeff's thing today was sold out because at 100 people, Zoom cut everyone else off. So we are going to make sure everyone gets the recording and increase the seats for next time. I had no idea we had a limit at 100. I'll be totally honest. We thought it was 1,000. So we apologize to those who couldn't watch this live. We'll get the announcements out. Resources are on the way. Jeff is we'll make sure we send these to you when we're done. 2 items here on the left and on the right is how you can reach us, how you can contact us, and so forth. Any final words, Jeff, before we wrap up?
I just want to thank everybody for joining. We'll for those of you who registered, we'll send you an email with the link with these documents, the coaching questions that you can use to dampen your stress during crisis and for your teams, and a small guide to how to communicate with clarity with some of the examples that I gave. Also, you can go to coachsource.com. We have a tab called Thought Leadership, and there are articles and documents to help you move through a crisis, to figure out how do I develop and grow people, and what can I do as a leader to really be a better coach and a better leader. It's been great to be with all of you today, and I appreciate all of you being here and all of you who are on the recording. Don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have other questions or we can be of service. Thanks for bringing your brain, and thanks for being an awesome human.
Thanks. And Jeff, we're getting lots of thank yous in the chat. I know we didn't get to every question, but thank you all for joining us today. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks for our next webinar. Have a good day.